Now, Werksmans attorneys says that a recent ruling underscores the need for clarity in public consultation. And it's about energy, something that we're focusing on tonight. Shell wanted to begin a seismic survey off the Wild Coast after it was granted exploration rights by the government in 2014. But as a result of the ruling in the Eastern Cape, that decision to grant those rights was reviewed and set aside. Let's find out more. We're joined by Bulelwa Mabasa, Werksmans attorneys, a land reform expert. Thank you for being with us, Ms. Mabasa. For people who haven't been following each and every blow, just outline exactly what that court ruling means for Shell and for South Africa.
Thank you for having me. I think it's important to first outline that the case, the Shell case, as it is widely known as, speaks about the rights of communities, the rights of communities to be consulted, the rights of communities to be meaningfully consulted when business or developmental companies or mining companies seek to in this case it was a seismic exploration, and in other cases it might be any kind of mining where it is essential and is critical that the rights of communities are respected, they are acknowledged, and that communities are meaningfully consulted. And here the meaning of communities just doesn't stop at the local community, but it goes to also certain interest groups and communities that may have other links to the land that is sought to be developed. In this case, the rights of traditional leaders and the rights of the local communities as it relates to their cultural and spiritual practices. So the Shell case is an addition to already a huge body of jurisprudence that has come for our courts that has emphasized the need to not just speak to communities in a way that is not meaningful and in the way that they are not completely engaged and consulted.
Yeah, in your summary, you say Judge Benenge was scathing in his criticism of Shell, saying that Shell's top-down approach, which is a thing of the past, finds no space in a constitutional democracy. So that's the engagement that you're talking about. What are companies expected to do if they want to come in and they want to do something like this, a seismic survey?
So, for example, I think it's important first and foremost for companies, whether you're a mining company or you're a gas exploration company or whatever company, that when you enter into the land that is owned by communities or where communities have rights and interests, you need to descend on that piece of land, understanding the community dynamics, understanding all the different types of interest groups, and understanding all the types of rights that communities have. In the past, for example, we saw that a lot of communities, especially in communal areas, who don't necessarily have legal title or strong legal rights, such as mortgage bonds or lease agreements, these communities often have informal rights that are not necessarily legally protected, or they don't have strong legal protection. What is now expected by exploration companies or development companies is that they need to live and breathe the lives and the lived realities of the communities around them, so that they get to understand the different levels of land rights that those communities may enjoy. Part of those communities might have the formal legally recognized rights, others might not. And so what this case particularly, as far as I'm concerned, speaks to the rights to practice culture and religion and spirituality, which is something that was not necessarily at the forefront in our law. These are rights that must be protected in terms of heritage and so forth. So it becomes very important for these companies to ensure that they have heritage specialists or people that are well versed in understanding the nuances and the dynamics that are a part and parcel of the lived experiences of those communities. So in other words, we're no longer just wanting to know whether someone has a title deed that entitles them to have a voice. We also need to go a little bit further to find out if there are any other communities around that may have informal rights, that may have different types of attachment to land, because as we have come to find out, land has multiple meanings to people. Land is important for spiritual purposes, for cultural purposes, for heritage purposes, and for a sense of belonging. So it becomes incumbent for companies to have an understanding and a deep understanding that those rights are as important as those people's rights who might have the benefits and the privilege of formal legal rights.
Ms. Mabasa, finally, where does this leave government, and how did the judgment view government's decision to grant those exploration rights in the first place? Because the Mineral Resources Minister, Gwede Mantashe, often talks about investment, and some South Africans would agree with him that, in fact, we need to get in on the energy game. As a net importer of fuel, we see how so many South Africans, way beyond the affected communities, are impacted by higher oil prices, for example, because we're not energy self-sufficient in any way.
Absolutely. I think we need to start to do a mental shift. And the mental shift that we need to do here as South Africans is that development is not necessarily at odds with sustainability, with the principles of environmental, social, and governance principles. The idea of sustainability is that development is important, but that it cannot happen at the expense of sustainability. We have to be cognizant of SDG goals, and I think the most important part of this judgment, to me, that has been left unresolved, is the policy direction that must come from cabinet, that must come from government, in terms of telling South Africans what areas are being earmarked for example, tourism, for example, sustainability, and what areas are earmarked for exploration. So I think the idea that exploration and development and also community interests are at odds with one another needs to be a thing of the past. What the future entails is that we need a policy direction where sustainability, exploration, and development must be led from the front and must be led by cabinet, so that everyone knows whether you're seeking to develop or whether you are part of a community, you have a sense of certainty around what government plans for land in South Africa generally.
All right, thanks for the great explanation of the issues there. Bulelwa Mabasa, Werksmans attorney's land reform expert.